Welcome back. It's the Studio Shangri-La podcast. And this one picks up off of the inheritance of memes or ideas from last time. And this is part 2. Breaking the cycle. Upgrading concepts for constructive evolution. If you've been around for long enough, you start to see some of the same cycles repeating, oftentimes. Whether that's societally, globally, or cycles within one's own life. And I have to believe that with awareness and with self-awareness, that things can be cycling up, so to speak. And what I mean about up is constructive evolution, positive forward motion, or it's regarded as such. Now, I'm saying evolution and the word constructive and the word positive, but different people have different ideas of what that is. So I want to make this fully clear that I am aware that my visions or views of things and how I would like them to go are going to be different than someone else's. And me talking about it or presenting it, it's not trying to impose my point of view. It's me just expressing myself and living my life and being a human and being creative and exploring. And I feel the need to say this because there's a fair amount of propaganda out there and rhetoric that encourages people to stay quiet and not have a point of view and not speak out about things. And yes, I think there is a line there. There is a balance, rather. That's a better way of saying it. But who am I to decide what that is for somebody else? So, this is a giant meme that often in different cultures and societies, there's a hierarchy, and this is a colonial thing. It's the colonial construct. And this is a huge issue in my mind of a society where the imposition of certain hierarchical constructs of people wanting to control others and having the need to dictate and decide how other people should live their lives. Now, I realize this is perhaps an oversimplification, but that is the prevailing atmosphere, that there are rules and constructs associated with the hierarchy that have some people benefiting and others not. and being more controlled, and people wanting to control others and benefit in a one-sided manner. I mean, this is leftover from colonization and slavery and the types of warlike conquering people. These are that decide to come in and impose themselves on another people. And it's a more animalistic way. That's not fair to the animals, sorry. Not animalistic, but it's a more primitive human behavior that is less conscious. You know, I see the notion of primitive, what some people call primitive, it's actually upside down. That's how I see it. Of people who are more connected to the earth and have less of a need to control others and are able to live more harmoniously. I see that as being more advanced. So, but these are huge memes that have embedded themselves, not just memes, but realities that have embedded themselves, what have become systemic problems that have embedded themselves. And I'm only saying problems because these things are quite manifest in worldwide events. You have people who've been oppressed rising up and causing violence, and then the other side causing more violence, and on and on. The cycling going on and on of people wanting to control others and dominate certain territories. Of course, I'm talking about Israel-Palestine situation, but there are other situations like that are active around the world and have been, of territorial disputes over resources and unfortunately religious beliefs or assets tied to religion, I should say. When I consider a more evolved idea that every land is holy and every speck of the universe is divine, and no one place more so over another outside of personal preference. I've been in Florida because to me it feels like a paradise compared to what I'm used to. But it doesn't mean that it's better than any other place on the earth. I suppose you could look at natural resources, but those are everywhere. And value is everywhere. So it just becomes a matter of people stubbornly clinging on to the same old ideas and defending the same old outdated, dusty doctrine of thousands of years ago, when clearly our lives are quite different from then. and our consciousnesses and knowledge have grown so much that it's really anachronistic to try and keep alive cycles from the past. And this is a fine line, of course, because you want to acknowledge what's happened before, but without continuing to perpetuate it and be limited by it and entrenched in it. And this could be a societal issue or a personal issue. You have to know, of course, what the issue is in order to change it. But if you keep fighting it, then that same old cycle that really you don't want to have repeat. That's what I'm talking about right now. Cycles that you don't want to perpetuate and want to grow out of. The goal is to learn enough to act differently or make different choices. And that is really what guides or directs evolution in the so-called decision tree terminology that I'm fond of. In the decision tree, you can make the choice to go left, right, diagonal, somewhere in between. And see if you get a different result, a more positive, constructive result. And there's been the paradigm, if you will. I know that's a buzzword, but it's convenient. Paradigm, a set of ideas or concepts, philosophies. There's been a paradigm, anyway, of this or that thinking. Dualistic thinking. And less so now, getting to be less so. And I consider that to be more consistent with the evolving reality. That there's more than two options in any given situation. And even computing is reflecting this. They're designing computers that are not just 0 or 1. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes it's neither and something else. Yes, we are presented with certain dualistic parts of our reality, like day and night. But there are shades of both, of course, depending on where you are in the world. And then, depending on where you are in the solar system. And beyond, in the galaxy. Where time changes. The experience of time changes. Based on your point of reference and surroundings or environment. It's clear to me, I should qualify that some of those things are flexible, and though we do have a measure of control about how we choose to take in information. Now, it's not as simple as snap your fingers, 1, 2, 3, change. I guess it could be if you're really committed. it's not always so simple or easy to change behaviors or ways of being that are firmly placed because they've been repeated again and again, like the connection of neurons or pathways in one's brain. It's not always easy to change and do something different. Now, what I'm referencing here is things that we would like to change, not positive habits that have already been created and that are constructive. Although it is possible to improve on those as well. What I mean here is letting go of ideas or constructs, behaviors, limiting beliefs that are getting in the way of something. And of course, you have to want things to change. I can't speak for the perspective, obviously, of anyone besides myself. But when you're looking at something like ongoing war, I mean, the participants of this have to want that to change in order for it to stop. And on a personal level, me within myself, in order to bring peace into my life, what kind of changes can I make? Am I willing to make? Am I willing to adapt and change? Maybe I don't immediately know how to do that, so I have to seek other perspectives. I have to step outside of myself in order to upgrade these memes or concepts that have been in play, perhaps through many generations in some form or another. To see that the metaphorical walls are see-through. To step outside of myself to a degree of mental freedom and expand beyond how I may have existed before. Which can be really illuminating. It can also be frustrating, of course. If you keep trying to accomplish something in life and it's not quite getting there, or any other larger issue and it's not quite getting there, the cycling out of old ideas is probably going to be necessary. Mental freedom, or degrees of freedom, which is optics and photonics, electronics, physics terminology. Degrees of freedom. Being able to operate at different dimensions from different perspectives. I do know enough to know that I don't always have the knowledge to expand past the scope of my own perspective. I know enough to know that I need help. I need some kind of a push to help me expand at certain situations. And this is one interesting reason why AI is so interesting. It's like a conglomeration of human perspectives. And maybe you've had this experience before too, in texting ChatGPT, and it'll give you an answer that you wouldn't have thought of just because it's giving you this completely different perspective on things that is logic. Not to say that emotion doesn't have its place, of course, but this is an example of how an outside perspective could possibly get one to expand and learn to the next level outside of oneself. And sometimes that can work with people, but often there's too much emotional interest or something that's at stake or some kind of agenda or what have you. So I think the introduction of computing and logic is overall causing us to expand. I do realize that there's been a lot of growing pains and issues, but I do think in the long run it causes people to become more logical and less extreme. And I think this is coming to be seen as a desirable quality. It's easy to swing into extremes, but it's seldom all that productive. The dismantling and upgrading of these either or memes or ideas is quite necessary in order to give people degrees of freedom, to not have to feel like in order to be accepted they have to stuff themselves into a category. But again, this is my perspective. Maybe some people really prefer to be categorized, and it's complex. When are categorizations and separations useful and when are they not? Can someone just feel free to be and express the full range of humanity? To be a human being, regardless of gender or preferences or personality or it'll be interesting to see how society changes when there's less of a stranglehold of people wanting to take advantage of others and people wanting to have power over others for whatever reason. And I would consider an example of this to be the prevailing medical industry. In which companies and organizations would rather create new conditions and new drugs and new therapies rather than actually curing the issue and solving. But oftentimes there are many solutions at hand. And ideally, knowledge or lack thereof should not be used in that manner. For one group to have unfair advantage over another. Creating conditions and perpetuating conditions in order to make money. Look, the organization of it all is one thing, but when it's one group taking advantage of another, that's a problem. The complex memes of modern society. Or some people wanting to create labels and conditions that are not helpful. Where have I been, right? Well, I still don't understand it fully. The desire to oppress or have power over. And it's one of those evolutionary things that people could grow out of in order to advance the global society. And in posting this podcast, I'm presenting ideas. I'm not wanting to control. I just don't hear anyone talking about things the way I'm talking about them. In trying to see beyond limiting constructs. That if you get too inflamed in what is, it just perpetuates that pattern. And actually, I think that some people in neuroscience are talking about this. Actually, a lot. It could be talked about on the broader scale of societal and evolutionary biology. the inheritance of meanings. The narratives that we create through generations, and realizing that these are not set in stone. They are always evolving. And they can evolve positively in a way that we want them to go on a personal level. Of course, one might just be going along and not questioning things and wanting to keep repeating the same things. That's okay. But once you've developed a certain degree of self-awareness, there is a desire to keep evolving and participating in that creative process and the creation of self and the enjoyment of life. I happen to hold as very important. And why are we here? To be ourselves. That's how I see it. I get spiritual, of course, but not really religious. Although I am influenced by what I grew up around and what I've learned of other religions and traditions, but I also know that those are human created ideas that I can participate in or not. And that I can choose the ideas that are going to be the most fruitful for my life, or at least I can try to anyway, and possibly keep updating them. I wrote recently about a giant collection of drawings I did called Gnosis. And Gnosis means divine knowledge. But it's really important for me to underscore here that I feel like this knowledge is accessible to everyone. And everyone can keep learning or experiencing how they choose. Divine knowledge meaning that everything is divine, that everything is holy. As the collection says, from the micro to the macro. And these are my ideas that enrich my life. And if I share them and encourage or help someone else, that's great. Plus, it's just a joy to create something like that. And it also creates personal evolution and meaningful contemplation and appreciation of life itself. I think it's important to remember that all of these, especially when it comes to something like religion, that all of these are concepts, and it's always possible to look outside of them. And I think science helps with that a great deal. And also a more generalized spirituality and philosophy. And if somebody else doesn't agree with my perspective, that's fine. But at the very least, I can try to encourage personal growth, openness, and awareness. That's how I see it. So, how will you evolve in 2024? And what choices will you make? And what choices will I make? And how will I best enjoy my life in the present moment? Happy 2024 and have a great new year.